Building a great company is a marathon, not a sprint. Each week, Krista Inkeman and the team at Tank New Media take on growth challenges, explore technology, and interview business leaders that are always upping their game. If you're ready to build scalable systems to drive your business forward, this podcast is for you.
Hi, everyone. Today we are with Kristin May, who is a content strategist at Tank New Media. She has tons of experience writing for nonprofit, destination, and overall agency marketing. In general, she helps clients create strategic, compelling, and consistent content for their brands, which is perfect because today we're going to be discussing how to unlock demand by creating and promoting content, which leads to overall better leads for your company. Welcome, Kristin.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't we just kick this off by talking a little bit about what is content in general? We use that word a lot in agency speak, but why don't we just let everybody know kind of what we're talking about?
Yeah, so normally when we think of content, we think of words on the page. You know, we think of blog posts, anything that's on our website that is readable. But really, content has gotten so much bigger than that. It's really anything that communicates. So it can be written words, but it can also be verbal words, and it can also be a visual piece that communicates something.
Oh, I see.
So content marketing is a strategic marketing approach focused on creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content, right? So now knowing content is so much more than just a word on the page. We need to think about, yes, websites, yes, blog posts, but social posts, emails, content offers, which would be your ebooks, quizzes, checklists, even your digital ads. There's words there. People are reading those. Infographics, memes, of course, your videos, podcasts, just like we're on now, and webinars. All of these are really important pieces of content that are consumable by people. And so we need to make sure that we're making it valuable, relevant, and consistent so that we can drive action. We can gain an audience and drive action from them.
Wow, seems like there's a lot of different ways to kind of get the word out these days.
There really is.
For sure.
Yeah.
So why is that important? Why is it important to create content across all of these channels?
Well, we want to grab attention. We want to establish brand awareness. We want to educate people. We want to delight people. But for us marketers, we are always thinking about how we can nurture leads through the buyer's journey, right? We want to capture their attention with something relevant and valuable, which we talked about, but we don't want to just leave it there. We want to be able to push them through the buyer's journey from awareness to consideration to decision.
Wow.
But content is also super important too because it helps us to establish thought leadership, to provide that for them. And one thing too that I love so much about creating content and why it's so important, it tends to be the gift that keeps on giving. And what I mean by that is, if people find something they like, something that is valuable to them and relevant, yes, I know I keep saying those words, but when they find things like that, they're going to want to share it with other people. And as they share it with other people, brand awareness grows, education grows, traffic is driven to the website. From your website, there's more content. And that content is hopefully also helpful to those people who've come that way. So creating content is so important this day and age.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just a couple stats that go along with that. From business to community, convert traffic to customers, content marketing can help your web conversion rate soar nearly 6 times higher. So just by using some good content marketing, you can really improve your overall conversion rate. And, back to your point about, educating customers, vendor content was cited by 65% of B2B buyers as having a significant impact on their choice of what to buy. And again, that was business to community. So even in the B2B sector, we're really seeing people doing a lot more research these days and really wanted to be educated about, the products that they're buying.
Yeah, it's again going to go back to the different ways that content can be dished out. So they want to see words on the page, but also videos, graphics, images, anything that's going to help them.
Definitely. And I know one thing that I hear a lot When we talk about content, we talk about who are we writing for, what are we trying to say? Well, I write for everybody, our content's for everybody, anybody who, and I think it's probably really important to narrow down, your target audience about who you're writing to. Can you just talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds great to want to reach everybody. Who doesn't want to reach everybody? But but it's not particularly helpful or realistic. And what I mean by that is, so instead of casting a wide net, and in that net you're getting all sorts. I'm not a fisherman by any stretch. As a matter of fact, I'm vegetarian. But if we're going with the fishing metaphor here, right? We're casting a large net, and in that large net, you're going to get fish of all types. You're going to get all sorts of sea creatures that you weren't necessarily aiming to get, and you're going to end up throwing them back in anyway. Was not necessarily what you wanted. But if you choose that lure, that specific lure that captures that very specific type of fish that you want, there is great satisfaction in that. And you're doing yourself a favor because you spent time and energy and strategy to a very specific target audience, and you're able to serve up to them things that are helpful. So in understanding your audience, you're wrapping your brain around their problems, how your product or service can address their problems, and it's specifically to them. So it's going to feel as though they're being talked to. And Who doesn't like that? Who doesn't like to feel like they're being thought of?
Yeah.
So as we narrow down our target audience, it's a matter of figuring out who these people are, who we would call our buyer personas, and then figuring out how we can address that target group. Yeah.
Yeah, specifically. I know it's always good when we can really hit on specific problems that group of people has. Really, speak their language, understand where they're coming from. That'll help in their research process and really create more value for them overall, it seems like.
Yeah. And you know what? If I'd be so bold to say this, I would go back to my 9th grade psychology class when I first learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Uh-huh. So there are very basic needs that everybody has. The need to feel included or feel safe or feel loved. Mm-hmm. Usually those problems can be traced back. When people are researching things, at the bottom of what they're searching for can usually be tied back to some of those pieces of Maslow's hierarchy. So if you're addressing a feeling of security when you're trying to sell a shed, for instance, you're connecting two really important pieces together that are going to resonate with that target audience.
Wow. That's a really great point. Really, really great point. Sometimes we look at the surface level of it, but there really is something deeper that people are usually looking for, even if they don't even realize it.
Yes, there always is. People are people, no matter what century you find yourself in, right? Or what day and age.
Definitely.
What technology.
Definitely. Yeah. And I know one way that we kind of look at content here is we're really trying to kind of systemize the process of making it. So who are we talking to? What are some of the topics, that we can create for a particular client? Do you want to talk to us a little bit about, systemizing that? Because that can be kind of an overwhelming thing for a lot of people.
Well, there are a lot of practical pieces to the systematizing. And I know that in this podcast, we want to focus on the owners, the C-suite people. They're not, and you all aren't always the practitioners, but it is good to know the value of systematizing and thinking through these things because it does affect how content is given out, which ultimately will affect the bottom line. So one reason to systematize your content, your content creation is for efficiency. Nobody wants to waste time or money. Mm-hmm. So being efficient, knowing who you're writing to, you're keeping them engaged, you're letting them know what to expect from week to week or from page to page or from a social post to social post. So not only is it helping the audience, it's helping your internal team because of efficiency, because of organization through what we would use as a content calendar. It keeps us on point to make sure we're addressing different aspects of the buyer's journey, make sure we're focusing on a specific target audience. We know what we're writing about. We know who's writing it. All of these pieces come together in the systematizing of your content creation, which again, at the end of the day, is to drive the bottom line, but it's also to make sure everybody's time is efficient and used well for the most maximum ROI.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of right along with that, thinking about systematizing, keeping things consistent, we can see consistent branding increases revenue by up to 23%. And that's from Inc. magazine, which is huge. So can you talk a little bit about, having a consistent brand while creating content?
Yeah, so I'm a huge believer in a style guide. I feel like that's one of the foundational pieces every business should have. That piece that says who you are, what kind of language you use. It could include grammatics, how you grammatically write things. Some people like the M dash versus the N dash, and I know I'm getting too deep into the woods here. But having a style guide keeps your brand looking the same across all platforms, no matter what
all those
you're
different
writing
channels we
or
looked at
where you're
earlier.
writing it. Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So for consistent messaging, yes. So and messaging it not only includes the content of the words, but the contents of your videos and also what your website looks like.
Yep.
And the images that you're serving up in correlation to all of these pieces, they all work together to establish your brand. And you want to have brand recognition and you want to establish trust with your audience, both your current customers and potential customers. So having a style guide, sticking to the style guide sounds bland and boring. I get it. But in the long run, it's that branding that makes such a huge difference.
Yeah. And I think it's also learning to be creative within the boundaries, being creative within the voice and the tone and the style of the brand that exists.
And you make a good point. I am a type A personality, and I like to just kind of work linear in a line, from A to B to C to D. And that I have that comfort in the style guide, but the style guide also gives liberties and freedoms to be able to work within the realm of your creativity and all of your creatives and your writers and your designers, right?
Sure.
So you're right. It's a matter of the balancing, being consistent, but being creative for sure.
Yep, definitely. Definitely. And one piece of, I think, the content puzzle that so many people resist or miss is the idea of promoting your content once you create it. What's your take on content promotion?
Well, number one, you should be writing your content, your words, for organic search, number one. So I know promotion, as we think about it, is usually through social media or through paid opportunities. But just keeping in mind, first and foremost, making sure everything you write is search engine optimized, is SEO friendly, because you're going to get organic promotion. So there's also paid promotion. And that is important too. That whether you do any sort of paid ads, PPC, retargeting, social ads, or even if you take something and you promote it through your social channels. And I don't mean necessarily by paying for it.
Sure.
But using all of their social channels to get the word out about your blog post, your video, your, one of your product pages, your service pages, but getting all that content out through every channel you can think of. Promotion can also include reposting blog posts. Their LinkedIn, you can republish. Medium, you can republish or repost. So there's a lot of ways to promote your content, to repurpose your content too, which I know is not specifically what we're talking about. Repurposing it and promoting it in every way you can just allows you to reach more people in your target demographic. And it will entice and draw in more top of the funnel leads, which will push more traffic to your website, which provides more opportunity for conversion and sales. So promotion's important.
Well, yeah, definitely. Definitely just getting the word out. And if you're going to create it, you want to make sure that people find it. If you're going to spend the time, making sure that it's out there, hopefully people find it for sure. For sure. So we've talked a lot about why these things are important. But if we move a little bit into some more of the execution, there's a lot of challenges that people have overall with creating content. 60% of people find it hard to produce content consistently, according to Zazzle Media. 65% of people find it hard to produce engaging content, according to Content Marketing Institute. And 62 don't know how to measure the ROI of their campaigns, which is, again, from Content Marketing Institute. So there's a lot of challenges out there that people are really having when they're trying to do content marketing, are there systems, are there strategies that you utilize that maybe we could talk a little bit about today to help ease that?
Yeah, this is a big conversation I feel like we could probably talk about for the next 2 hours. And that would probably just scratch the surface. But for the sake of our audience listening, so producing content consistently, making it engaging, even creating the strategy in the first place can sometimes feel so overwhelming. Where do you start? Where do you begin? Well, I even think just brainstorming and having a strategy session, just brainstorming. What is it that we should talk about? Who are we trying to reach with this? How is it helping them? So just taking time to think through those things, I think is a super place just to start. Shouldn't end there though. It's a great place.
I think a lot of
start.
people skip that piece too of like, okay, wait, who are we talking to? What matters to them for sure?
Yeah. And then taking that a step farther and thinking through the execution of this. Well, okay, we kind of know who we want to write to, what we want to write about, what action we want them to take, how we think it's going to help them. But who's going to even write this piece? How is it, and is it going to be a blog post? Is it going to be a social post? Is it going to be an email drip campaign? Thinking through those pieces, how to optimize those pieces. There's different ways to optimize different content vehicles. If it's an email, it's going to be different than a website page, which might be even slightly different than a blog post, depending what you're aiming to do. And then figuring out where you're going to publish it, where this is going to live. And then, of course, the promotion piece, which we've already talked about. How are you getting it out there? Do you have some budget to put behind this? And then in that last piece, which is just so important, is just analyzing it. What are you getting from this? Are the goals that you hoped to meet being met? Looking at the analytics, analyzing what was done, figuring out what you can do better or tweak. And that's one thing great about publishing to the internet is that these pieces are living and breathing. So if you have a website page, if you have a blog post, you have a landing page, a content offer, any of those pieces can be tweaked, A/B tested, and analyzed on a consistent basis. As a matter of fact, that's one of the best practices of inbound marketing, is constantly looking at that, seeing how it's working, and then making tweaks to get the most mileage that you can out of all the content you're producing. And if we're talking about systems, Krista, I would be failed to not mention a content calendar. I did mention it earlier, but literally having a spreadsheet or a document or a software in which you can record week by week or however often you do your content, every other week, monthly, quarterly, however. But you track who your target persona is, your target audience, the keywords you're trying to hit, what it is you're writing. Again, is it a blog post, is it a video, whatever you're trying to produce. The content calendar should include your CTA, what action you want them to take. These are things that should come out of your strategy conversations, your brainstorming meetings. The content calendar is just a place to put it down so that you can be organized. And going back to what we talked about earlier, being efficient with our time and getting maximum ROI. A great tangible way to start this is by having a content calendar. And then occasionally, which I probably suggest maybe quarterly, maybe semi-annually, doing a content audit. Let's validate the relevance and our consistency in our messaging and what we're putting out, and then finding opportunities and gaps of where new content could be created. So it's a never-ending effort, but it keeps you out there. It keeps people finding you because you're answering questions, you're solving problems, you're offering solutions, you're educating, all these things, which people are looking for all the time. You just get to serve up your product or service as the answer, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's a great system. And with that, it seems like there's a framework there to really kind of make this process more repeatable and kind of set some foundational pieces that people could use kind of as they start working on this for themselves. So when we look at some of those foundational pieces that you've mentioned, so overall determining your niche audience is kind of one of the first things we ought to do. So figuring out who are we talking to, and And then where do they spend their time? What medium should we be putting this on? Is it on sites, emails, social channels, kind of all of those pieces? So who are we talking to? Where are they at? And then what kind of content resonates with them? So not necessarily trying to promote or sell our product, but how are we solving their problems? How are we providing value to them? Through the content overall. And this could be through tutorials, checklists, educational material, all of these good pieces of content that wonderful people like you create all the time. And then it's really serving those up and getting those out there through blogs, infographics, content offers, podcasts, making sure that we are getting them published and then promoting them, kind of as that last piece is, how can the target audience find the content that we're creating, and then wrapping that all up with overall analysis and then, kind of keep going through that process. Does that sound pretty close?
You nailed that, Krista. What we talked about in the past, 10, 12 minutes, you succinctly said in about 30 seconds. Yeah, exactly. You're starting with your target audience, which developing personas is a interesting practice in and of itself. But starting with targeting your audience all the way to analyzing, that entire process there is what should happen on a regular ongoing basis. But yeah, you summed it up very nicely.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today, Kristin. I know, you said, I feel like we barely scratched the surface here, but as we were talking, I jotted down a few more notes of things that we could definitely dive deeper into in other podcasts. So I'm sure we'll have you back on here soon.
That sounds great.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kristin.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Talk to you later. Bye.
For tools and resources, visit manufacturinggrowth.com.